And then I sort of got it that he wanted me to go back.
Go back?
Please don't make me go back.
And then there's this really hard landing as Pauline goes back into her body.
I know who I am. I'm the person who was just with Jesus, but I don't know my parents. I don't know anybody.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God, those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome to episode 112. This would be part 2 of Pauline's story, near-death experience of Pauline Glamachek of Australia. So if you didn't hear part 1, you have to go back to last week's episode. Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. Don't worry, we'll wait. We'll just go ahead. We'll wait. Okay, good. Okay, now then. Interesting. I got an email here in this past week from a listener by the name of Roger, and he said that he has friends who don't believe in near-death experiences. Why? Because they're not biblical. They're not in the Bible. If they're not in the Bible, they don't believe. And I thought, does the Bible make a claim that everything's in the Bible? I didn't think so. But I went online and I thought, well, is there a particular issue with this particular faith? And I thought, okay, one of the issues is that sometimes people come back confused by their experience. So they come back with information that their interpretation is not theologically correct. And I thought, well, even that, are there not thousands of theologians who disagree on the interpretation of the Bible? Isn't that why we have thousands of different denominations? Because people disagree on what different things mean. And, that means this. No, it doesn't. It means that. So interpretation is a little shaky in that area. Bottom line is, I think you have to measure the fruits of near-death experience. What happens when people come back? What happens? Pauline here, who wasn't even sure there was a Jesus or a Mary, is introduced to them and is turned around to just a wider, more open, loving perspective for the rest of her life, and you'll hear about that in this episode. Go back to Faith Green, episode 97, 98? She had become a criminal, and she got flipped around by her near-death experience. Go back to Howard Storm in episode 7. That's the classic one. An atheist, hated God, hated the concept of this God that didn't exist anyway. And his near-death experience takes him to demons and then to Jesus. And he comes back and becomes a pastor in his church. I mean, if you just met, I don't know, let's put it this way. I don't know anyone, and I've seen a lot of near-death experiences, but I don't know anyone who's come back and gone, I got to get me some more Satan. I need more Satan in my life. I need a life of sin. That's what I don't hear it. So if you just measure the fruits, kind of like St. Paul talks about the fruits of the Holy Spirit, love, kindness, joy, all those things, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the fruits. So based on fruits, I'm more than good with near-death experiences, So let's get to part 2 here of Pauline and her near-death experience. And if you remember,
the story goes on.
Yes, it does. And if you remember, this all began because she was running downhill as this 11-year-old, and she fell and hit her head against a rock, and she was gone. And in this near-death experience, Jesus, brings her over to a bigger rock.
He said, come, my child. And he sat me down on a rock.
And he waved his hand, right? And right there's the book. There's her life review in book form just hanging there in space. And she gets to look at her life up to age 11.
Because everyone was so beautiful, I didn't recognize that it was my life review.
Yeah, or as she put it,
but tell me what this life is about, because I don't get it.
And Jesus told her what life is all about.
It's about love. Life is about love.
So let's begin right there. Life is about love as Jesus continues his teaching moment. And then he needs to convince her that it'd be a good idea to come back. That takes a little bit of doing. Here's part 2 of Pauline's near-death experience on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
And I said, but you don't get it. No one lives like that. I can't live like that if everyone else doesn't live like that. And he just laughed when I said, you don't get it. I said to him, please teach me because I don't know. And he said, look, your life can be beautiful if you look through the eyes of love. And if you choose to look through the eyes of love, I said, what do you mean choose? Well, everything is about how you focus, how you direct your focus, and everything is about love. And if you look through the eyes of love, you will have a beautiful life. And whatever you focus on, you will have. You can create for yourself. He sort of gave me a few life lessons there. I didn't realize at that stage because I was a child. I was always just reacting to the situation in front of me. I wasn't imparting any of my own energy into the situation. So I didn't understand that you could choose your perspective, that you could choose your thoughts, that you could choose the emotions that you entertain. I didn't understand that. So
Yeah.
I didn't really understand.
I'm flashing on Mother Teresa right now, who saw Jesus in everybody. Everybody on those streets of Calcutta. This is the poorest of the poor. Disease and the pain and the suffering and the lowliness and every person Mother Teresa saw, she saw Jesus, and so she was helping Jesus. And so seeing
Yes.
through the eyes of Jesus, if you will, and seeing Jesus, I think that's kind of what you were seeing with that life review. You were getting to see through his eyes the
Yes.
perfection of what we can be. He was seeing the love that can be there, could be there. It's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, I feel like he showed me just the moments where people in my life were reflecting him. Everyone was so very beautiful. He sees our beauty, and he wanted to show me that, not any guilt, or he didn't show me, every aspect of my life. He just showed me the most beautiful, beautiful, shining examples of. It ran like one of those, the old-fashioned films that flicker, but it was in a book. I
Yeah.
know it sounds strange.
And there was just the
But
one moment there that he wanted you to see, just that one moment in particular, as far as the negative goes. Was that your experience?
yes, just that one moment. And I said something really hurtful to her. And I knew that, that sort of stood out like a sore thumb. So it's just about accountability,
Yeah.
That's what I took away from it. Or that's what I take away from it now. Um, but and then he sort of, just to reiterate the point about freedom of choice, he I said to him, but look, you can tell me all of these things, but I don't want to be parted from you. You don't understand. There's just no love like yours on earth. I don't want to be parted from your love ever again. Please don't make me go back. And I began to just beg and plead, and I just held on to him so much. And he said, you won't be parted from my love. It was as though, a matter of fact. And then he said, now look here, look again. And he showed me two scenes that I remember. I think he showed me more, but these two things I remember very clearly. One was a young man who was looking at me so lovingly. And as an 11-year-old, you're sort of on the cusp of puberty. You're beginning to think about boys. You're beginning to sort of entertain those ideas. And so I thought to myself, oh, okay, this is in my future. I thought, oh, this man loves me the way that I want to be loved, this young man. And it was just such a beautiful love that shone through his face at me. It was so a very wholesome love, and I found, he looked so beautiful. He just shone with that love light so beautifully. And I thought, well, this is perhaps going to be my husband. And that's what I thought inside of myself. But he didn't correct me. He just smiled. Um, so, he then showed me also a picture of me behind, sort of a scene behind me. And I'm standing up and I was doing I was addressing a rather large audience. And I turned around and said, is this for my life? Is this for my future? And he said, yes. And I thought, well, when I saw that young man, especially the other scene of me talking, I found that really blew my mind because, in 1977 in Australia, You didn't see women address a very large gathering of people. And funnily enough, it was all these blue sort of curtains, sort of the Facebook blue, um, and lights. It was all very lit up. So I thought, well, if this is going to be my life, okay. And I said, well, okay. And should I tell everybody about what's happened here? Okay, if I go back, should I tell everybody? And he said yes. He laughed at me and he said yes. I said, because they won't believe me. They won't believe that you're like this. They won't believe that life is about love. Should I tell them? And he laughed as if. And now I look at it as though, really, Trevor, I have to laugh at myself as a child.
It's great. I love the innocence of it. I love it. I love it.
So that was that. As soon as there was no more negotiation, as soon as I'd agreed, I was just like projected back into my body.
Then suddenly you were back in the body.
Yes, I was back in my body. I had my eyes closed. I had my right temple being licked by a beagle who had just come out of nowhere. And funnily enough, that's exactly where I'd hit my head. I opened my eyes and the clouds were pixelated sort of for a second there and then formed in front of me. And I could hear voices running and, this panic coming towards me, and I didn't recognize my parents. I had total amnesia. I know who I am. I'm the person who was just with Jesus, but I don't know my parents. I don't know my sister or my brother. I don't know anybody, but I know that Jesus is real.
Wow. But now you're getting into the stranger's car to go see a doctor. Man, that has to be uncomfortable. Ooh.
The stranger is my father. Even though I'd just seen my life review, in that life review, my father looked, he was aglow, They took me to the doctor and just said, tell him what you told us. All I wanted to tell them was because I had a splitting headache. I had some spinal fluid, apparently it was spinal fluid coming or brain fluid coming out of my ear. So it was quite a severe TBI, traumatic brain injury, and that resulted in amnesia. And so I told the doctor, and the doctor said, oh, yes, right temporal lobe shock. This is something that happens when the right temporal lobe is damaged.
So you told him the Jesus stuff. Were your parents there at the time too?
Oh, yes, I told them as soon as I could sort of came around and could talk, I immediately told everybody. I said, you don't understand. I was just with Jesus. I don't, but I was just, who are you and who are you? And so
you have a doctor there going, well, see, it's the bump on the head. So all these experiences, what's beautiful about your story, Pauline, because you don't come from faith, because you don't know all the things all of that was new to you, everything. You can't make this stuff up, I'm sure there are people, well, all the information, all the knowledge is out there in the universe, and the universe gives to you. Oh, get out of here with your universe. There's a God. Hello, there's a God,
Exactly. Speak his name.
Yeah. Amen. Amen, sister. So he's telling you you're nuts, basically, and this happens, and so how long did the amnesia last?
4 or 5 hours. Considering that I had brain fluid coming out of my ear, I recovered very well. And again, I was very sensitive to what was going on in my family, and I could tell that it was, it really worried my parents. As soon as he said brain injury, I think they were just, I could tell they were just extremely worried. And so I didn't want to be the center of that, and I just understood not to speak of it again. Nobody believed me.
Not only that, but you have parents who, although they've gone back into or gone into the church, near-death experiences were not known yet. That book hadn't been written yet. That was written in the 70s by Moody, Life After Life. Nobody knew the experience you had been shared by so many others in some way, shape, or form.
And I didn't know till 2015.
You still didn't know in 2015?
I didn't know up until 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. How did you stumble upon it?
Well, when I had to have emergency surgery and under anesthetic, I had an encounter with some three beings who were trying to take me out of my body. Um, and they were pulling me. And first of all, I thought they were nurses and that I was coming out of anesthetic. I didn't actually leave my body. I was upright from my body, and these nurses were trying. I thought they were moving me from the operating table onto a different bed, and but they were just pulling me and saying, "Come with us, come with us." And I thought, well, I can't come with you. I've just had this operation on my abdomen, and when I resisted, they became quite malevolent looking. And then I realized I was having a near-death experience, and I said, "Oh, I'm not coming. I'm not coming with you. I'm waiting for Jesus." And as soon as I said that, they let go, or I was let go, and just went back into the blackness of anesthesia.
Wow.
Um,
The power of his name again. The power of his name and of belief.
yeah,
And
yes,
this is while you were out under anesthesia. That it's interesting. The nurses thing, because going back to the Faith Green again, she had some issues with nurses too. It's kind of funny. So in the room at the time as you're having this near death experience, are you also seeing what actually is happening physically in that room?
well, when I realized that I was having that it was a near-death experience, because the nurses' faces sort of turned malevolent and very impatient, and I thought, oh, okay. And then I looked around and I could see there were a number of doctors at the foot of my bed and around near my abdomen, and it was as though my perspective was different again, like it is in like it was in my near-death experience of childhood. That sort of, you can have that retracted perspective where you can see things from, you know, magnified or from a distance.
Yeah,
And from a
but in your
distance,
case, you weren't flatlined or anything. You were just watching what was actually happening in the room.
I didn't bother researching whether I had flatlined. I guess I could. Um, I guess I could research whether I had flatlined.
Well, I think you would be able
I'm
to
not.
tell by what they were doing. I mean, if they're scurrying about, going, "Oh my gosh," because a lot of times that's what will happen. So if that wasn't happening, then for
Mm,
whatever reason, you were allowed to experience that. Tell you what, I want to pause that for just a moment because I think to have that experience with demons, did they look like demons eventually? Did they look like reptilian? What do they end up looking like?
no, they just ended up looking malevolent,
Okay, they were just looking mean at you.
just mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back because I got a big gap here. So now you're back into the world. You realize people aren't real thrilled about hearing this kind of stuff, and there's certainly no understanding of near-death experiences. So do you just
No.
kind of sit on it?
Yeah, I sat on it until I met a friend of mine um, in the final years of high school. So it's the age of 16, 17. Um, I became interested in literature and psychology. Yeah, I certainly didn't find any kind of spiritual fulfillment in the church, unfortunately. But books and reading were just, I was just obsessed with knowledge. And I guess in subconsciously, I was always looking to understand whether I was insane, whether that was an insane episode, because I couldn't let it go. And I knew that I just didn't have the same values as everybody else. So I discovered Jung. And apparently, I now know that he had a near-death experience. So I was more into that field of knowledge, and I wanted to experience oneness. So I tried meditation. Uh, I went to a place called Buddha House and really began to experience that beautiful feeling of peace that I felt when I was with Jesus. And I thought I was getting deeper and deeper into this practice, and I thought, oh, I better be clear about this because I know where my allegiance is. And if I can't do this practice and believe in Jesus at the same time, then I can't go any deeper than this. I'd already read the Tibetan book of the dying before I'd read the Bible. I still
Hmm.
haven't fully read the Bible.
So
The
did you
Gospel
leave
of
it
John.
then? Did you leave the Buddhism?
I did, yes. The monks laughed at me when I said, "Can I believe in Jesus?" And so I said, "Oh no, I can't keep practicing here." Um, so I sort of fell away from my spiritual practice. I still tried to adhere to the values, but then, um, as luck would have it, I didn't understand fully what love was, and um, it takes a while to develop your understanding through our different phases of life. And as you said earlier, that's why we have such a long life, so that our understanding develops. Yeah, so I married a man who, unknown to me, he really had no faith at all, but I thought I had enough faith for the both of us. And but to cut a long story short, we separated when I was pregnant, and um, so I had a son and became a single mother, and became um, very consumed with affording my son the right school, the education, the right address, the right home, um, all of the right stuff, because I was very aware that I was a woman alone in the world. I didn't practice spirituality. I became very depressed as I became more driven by materialistic values. I ended up with clinical depression, which was a combination of bad decisions, bad self-care, um, lack of love for myself and for others. Had a visitation.
Is this when you were 33? Ironically, 33?
Yes, ironically. Yes. One night I was crying and just curled up on my side in the fetal position. And I think I called out to God because I was in so much emotional pain. And I just felt this presence behind me. And I thought, oh, somebody's come into my house. I just froze. I thought a rapist has come into the house. I haven't locked up. I've been careless. I stopped crying, and I just felt this pressing up against me from behind me, and suddenly this voice came into me and just simply said, "Be not afraid." And just this calm came over me, and he said, "I have not forsaken you." And I was imbued, when you have your eyes closed, and I just saw this gold, and I felt that every cell in my body was just imbued with this honey, this golden amber honey and energy. And it was just this healing that took place from the tips of my toes through to the crown of my head. And this energy, this beautiful, whether it was the Holy Spirit, but I knew that it had gone, it left through the top of my head, and I knew that it had gone um, into space. um, but those words, "Be not afraid, I have not forsaken you,"
And the depression was gone?
lifted immediately.
Wow.
Lifted immediately.
Never to return?
Never to return.
So this lifted feeling,
Yes.
what a joy. I mean, when you think
Yes.
about where you were, and anybody who's
Yeah.
gone through something like this, where you were, and then suddenly it's just gone.
Gone. Gone. In the morning, it was just filled with energy, filled with just knowing, everything that it was just added that reassurance to me that, okay, what happened to me when I was 11 was real, and so it was also a part, like as though a part of my brain or consciousness that had split off had come back, and I was whole again. My soul was whole again. Uh, yeah.
Nice.
I have a stronger relationship with God, with Jesus. Um, and I just have this different outlook. I don't, my view isn't, I'm not so myopic about performance and materialism and all of that stuff. I return to my spiritual center. And
And where did you run into
so
the young man that Jesus promised you?
not yet. That was
Not yet. Okay.
not yet. but, yeah, I did. Yeah, I just became a better mother. Everything was better. Um, but I did meet a man. He was a police officer, and it was just at that time when my son was getting older, and you know, there it's not as easy to be a single mother when your son is 18 as it is when they're prepubescent or so. He was 18 and he was beginning to push back, and it was, get a life, mum, and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, you know what, perhaps I should. You're 18 now. And so I started dating and ended up marrying this man. And now is when this young man came into the picture, because after I came into a relationship with this man, my son was in the kitchen one day and we were cooking or cleaning up together actually, and we was just talking to me about something great happening in his life, and he just turned around, and I can't exactly remember the words, but he turned around and looked at me, and he had such love in his eyes, this wholesome, beautiful love. And it was, okay. It was my son that Jesus had shown me.
I love it. I love it. Surprise. That's funny.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. So this mother-son relationship, just reinforced again. But this marriage this man was traumatized through his work very badly, and the marriage turned awful in a very, very short amount of time, and turned violent actually. And I sustained an injury, and that's how I ended up having to have that surgery. So at the time of that surgery, I want to make this really clear, because I think it's important that people understand what brought me to encounter these malevolent people, because I was very bitter at that time. I was very bitter. I was very bitter at my husband. I felt let down by everybody. And yeah, really, my son had sort of, I think that, he didn't really like the situation. So he'd moved away from me a little bit. And yeah, so I was not in a good heart state.
Angry, bitter. Yeah.
And that's when I had the negative experience. But having woken up from this negative experience, I saw everybody with the eyes of Jesus. Everybody was beautiful. Everybody. I could just see the beauty in everyone. Everybody glowed, and I was in a state of grace. That's all I can describe it as. I was just in this beautiful state of grace that lasted for a long time. It lasted for a year.
Wow.
And
you're seeing
yeah.
everybody the way you were seeing in life review time. You were seeing through Jesus' eyes.
Yes.
For a year.
For a year. For a year, Trapper.
What a gift. Again, what a gift.
Yes. But even more than that, people who were spiritually attuned to Jesus also saw me. I had to go for a second follow-up surgery, and the spiritual counselor sort of was going around doing the rounds, and she popped in, and the nurse, we sort of had a talk, and within minutes we were talking about Jesus, and this spiritual counselor came round, and within, 15 minutes she'd offered me a job at the hospital. So, there was just all of these beautiful things were happening, these beautiful relationships, and people were such a blessing to me. And I felt I was able to be a blessing to people because I could just see the most beautiful aspects of them.
Wow, that's just okay. Okay, so does an event end that, or you're just suddenly aware that it's back to kind of where it was?
I haven't quite put my finger on to whether it's back to kind of where it was, but it's really not back to kind of where it was. Yeah, it's not back to where it was. My relationship with Jesus is just stronger than it's ever been. I've done a lot of research about mental health, and in fact, I'm now a counsellor, and I work in the drug and alcohol sector, which is wonderful because a lot of people who have been affected or taken away by addiction, their spiritual rebirth is really a part of their recovery. So,
well, that's
yeah.
tremendous. You're doing the counseling work. That's obviously right up your alley. You obviously have an empathy, so it all makes sense. Oh, we forgot one little aspect here. I got to jump back to the stage. Back to the stage. Are you going on the stage to talk to people about this? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. He's opening doors, so I'm just saying yes to whatever, as difficult as it is, because I haven't been theologically trained, and I'm one of those people who just loves the Gospel of John, and I've read that over and over and over again because it's I don't know, but I will do just whatever.
If you need to be,
whatever.
he'll get you there. If you need to be and you feel pulled to it, you mentioned John, so you're reading John. That's good. Your story alone says so much. Your story alone says so much. It's the kind of thing. You're a wonderful speaker. You're wonderful. You're articulate. You have the emotion. It's real. There are people saying the words, but I don't feel it. You say the words, I feel it. I feel it. It's real. What you experience is real.
Oh, I so want to share that with people because I know it's very healing. He actually put a song to me recently when I asked him if I should write this book. And this is what he said to me. I did some automatic writing. He said, "I did not come to you like a secret thief for your sanity. I did not come for you subtly. I alighted within you. Why do you then set yourself under a bushel? For have I not promised you that we are bound and that I will magnify your light in me? Therefore have courage. I have not forsaken you."
Beautiful. If there is a gospel verse that is the key to everything we do here is who lights a lamp and sticks it under a bushel or sticks it under a bed. He said it more than once. Who lights the lamp?
Yes.
And we do that with Jesus. We do that when we don't tell these stories.
That's right.
We do that when we don't write the book. We do that when we don't do the podcast. We do it in so many different ways. We do that when we have someone in front of us who needs to hear your Jesus story, and we don't. Who lights a lamp and sticks it under a bed or a bushel?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask you this. Just who's Jesus?
Who's Jesus? Well, his love is Savior of the world. His love rights all wrongs. His mercy and his joy, he's just glory, He is our Savior. And he is super real. He is the reality, the truth that we're all looking for. He's everything. He's just everything to me.
Well, this was just over the top. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much for doing the work that you do. It's really important work.
Thanks, Pauline. And I'm telling you, if they ever make your story into a movie, the first shot has to be the beagle licking your wound. I'm telling you, that's a winner. The beagle licking your wound. And you going, what? Yeah, I can see it. How about that Jesus? He never lies, does he? You can't catch him in a lie. Hey, look, here's a picture of a nice young man. Ooh, my future husband. No comment, just a smile, because curiosity will always get us. Had to come back. Good stuff. A couple of other things here in this episode. Pauline was 33 when Jesus came a-visiting, right? 33. And said what? I have not forsaken you. When he was 33, what did he say on the cross? Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? He's taking us once again to the cross. Just like last week, he took us to the cross with the piercing of the heart and the water and the blood. He took us to the cross, right? And here again, he's taking us to the cross when he cried out, just as you had cried out, lying there all curled up on your bed, crying out to God. And here he comes, I have not forsaken you. And what Jesus was doing on the cross was actually quoting Scripture. Psalm 22. where David says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then he goes on prophetically to say in that psalm, they have pierced my hands and my feet. They have cast lots for my clothing. All very prophetic. But the overall theme of that psalm is, where are you? You've saved me before. You've come to the rescue before, but where are you now? And Pauline was kind of in that spot too. He's certainly been there. Jesus has certainly been there throughout her life. And that near-death experience, obviously, was something to grasp onto and hold on to. And here was Jesus saying to Pauline, and all of us, I haven't forsaken you. You may not hear my voice as Pauline is, but I am just as much with you right now. A couple of things, too, from the last episode that just kind of bounced back at me this week. Mary, the sorrow and the love in her, while the crowd, the mob, that mob mentality that was going on, that stench of hatred that was in them, she wasn't reacting to that. That just kind of jumped out at me, and I didn't mention it last week. She stayed out of reaction. She had grief, she had sorrow, and she had love going on, but never a reaction, never anger towards the mob. But she stayed connected to God in love. Oh, and one more thing from last week. And you know how we began this episode talking theologically, how different people have different views theologically on things. I think Pauline just said something so theologically correct. When she talked about, okay, she hits her head and she starts floating above her body and she sees herself and she's floating up, and she said it was a wonderful place. She was detached from everything. She had no decisions to make. Everything was great, wonderful, until she got to a certain point, and I can't remember if she said it was clouds or what she said, but she just kind of hit this place where it was cold. She felt cold, and that scared her. And all of a sudden, there was fear. Before, she said there was no fear, no attachment to anything, no decisions to be made. Everything's great. And then suddenly, she was cold and afraid. And then she looked up. She passed through that, and she looked up, and then there's the tunnel and the white light and all that, right? Okay. Theologically speaking, what are we talking about here? Jesus told us that the devil is the ruler of this world, right? He says the ruler of this world is the devil. And then St. Paul says, well, where's he ruling from? Does it say the devil rules from hell? No. St. Paul reminds us in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that these powers and principalities, these evil ones, rule from the heavens. Up there. In between here and heaven. If you go back to the Faith Green episode, I think I did this in 97, not 98, it might have been 97, where we talk about this in-between place, what goes on, spiritually speaking, between this plane of life and heaven. We talk about this in-between place. And here again, here's Pauline heading up, everything's fine, and then suddenly everything's cold, and I'm afraid. And there is the realm of those powers and principalities, those evil ones. And I think she went through it on the way up to heaven. So thank you so much. I need your story. Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. Also, thank you so much for making us a 5-star podcast. Yes, you have. How do you do that? By leaving reviews, ratings and reviews in your app, if you'd be so kind. That'd be awesome if you have the time to do that. My Patreon shout out this week goes to Ed Moran. Thank you so much, Ed, for helping us out through Patreon on a monthly basis. You can link to that here at episode 112 of touchedbyheaven.net, or go to patreon.com and just search for Trapper Jack. And don't forget Mary, His Messenger, the CD, or download Mary, His Messenger, because Jesus just keeps sending us his mom with important messages. You can find that linked here at episode 112 of touchedbyheaven.net. All right, I'll see you here next week for another cool episode, I am sure. Wonder what it's going to be. Who knows? We'll find out together. Here at Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.